Welcome to SportsLit and a conversation with Rod Black. His book, Cut to Black, A Legendary Life in Sports and Maybe a Few Beers, is published by Simon & Schuster Canada. Release date, May 19th. I'm Neil Acharya. Rod Black is familiar to Canadians as an incredibly versatile broadcaster. He has hosted hockey and gymnastics, done play-by-play for figure skating and boxing. Any permutation in the wide world of sports that you could think of, he's done. And sometimes it could be in the same week, earning him the nickname Game a Day Black. He moved from local TV in Winnipeg to national coverage in Toronto, first with the precursor to SportsNet, CTV Sports, and then TSN. The true test of versatility in sports broadcasting is an Olympic assignment. And he's done that too, several times over. And he's even covered hard news with Canada AM. His professional career began in the early 1980s and continues to this day. Rod's journey shows us how raw and exciting sports broadcasting was. Access was abundant and creativity wasn't stifled. Local broadcasts were seen as necessary, and nationally there were budgets for international travel, show elements such as stand-ups and feature interviews. By the time Rod left TSN in 2021 as part of cost-cutting measures by Bell Media, the landscape has evolved considerably, for better and for worse. Today, Rod is still going, commentating Canadian Elite Basketball League games, and as we'll hear, basketball was the sport he showed the most promise in as a Manitoba high schooler. He just can't sit still. Have Mike will travel is his motto, and it's based on a passion for all levels of sports, which he's had since he was a little kid. The book covers often humorous and noteworthy interactions with the likes of Charles Barkley, Wayne Gretzky, and Arnold Palmer. It also covers his working relationships with individuals like TSN CFL analyst Dwayne Ford and NBA commentator Leo Routens. Our conversation leans more into the sports broadcasting industry, its current state, realistic Canadian expectations about what could be done better, and where it may be heading. So, let's do it. Time to cut to black. Welcome in, Rod Black. I read in your book you never pass up on a chance to meet someone new, so you are today.
Yes, I am. Neil, nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Kind of via Zoom.
Yeah, via Zoom, exactly.
Via Zoom. I'm still convinced that Zoom, the people who invented Zoom, I believe started the pandemic. I really do. Because that's since then, everybody Zooms. It's become part of our vernacular. Zoom used to mean something completely different, Neil. Now you know what it means. I'll Zoom you. No, you Zoom me. I'll Zoom you. Hopefully we'll meet in person one of these days.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm surprised we didn't, because for 6 years I was at Channel 9 Court where you worked. I was at the NHL Network. Yeah, at the NHL Network. But
you were in the back. You were in the back. The back bowels.
The back nine is actually what they used to call that parking lot.
Yeah. You look familiar though, so I think I have seen you before. So
yeah, I was there. I was over there. I've since moved on to I'm at CBC. We'll talk about that too, because it comes up in the book.
Sure.
But first and foremost, I mean, congratulations. The book comes out today, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning to you earlier, I just interviewed Richard Zokol for his book Zocology. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it.
Is that what he called it?
Zocology. Yeah.
Disco Dick.
Yeah, Disco Dick. Yeah. Well, that's the cover of him. Cover is him with his Walkman on. I mean, because you haven't read it, I'll kind of give you the background, and it ties into this question, which is there's a trend to increasingly have a hook to your book, and his book has a hook. It kind of talks about the mental aspect of the game and his Mind Track app that he's the co-founder of, that kind of reframes your mind when you play the frustrating game of golf. Chris Pronger has a book out called Earned, which also has kind of a hook to it, kind of to master your mind and your path to success along with his life story. I was wondering if the publisher, Simon & Schuster or Brian J. Wood, asked you to kind of come up with a hook to this, or were they okay with you just telling your story?
Yeah, I think that was the thing. I mean, I don't really have a hook. I have a lot of hooks. I feel like a massive fisherman. I guess I should be a guy named Rod. I got a lot of hooks, and I got hooked in the business, and I think I got hooked through the years, and I'm still hooked on sports. By the way, I love Richard Zolko, one of my true dear friends in the world of golf, and I'm sure that book will be successful. But it's interesting. We had a lot of different titles we were ruminating through that. We playing off of Black, obviously. Somebody wanted Back in Black. I didn't want that. I liked Black on Black. There were others. I mean, my catchphrase always was "Hello, Canada." Whenever I got on the air. So, but then I think we settle on this, and it's actually it's a good hook because kind of rode around once the title came around. I'd been about 3/4 through and still really didn't have a title, as you probably hear from a lot of people. A lot of people complete their books and they have no titles. But it's as you probably have read, that it's a fun read. It's a lighthearted read, but it's kind of a journey read. And I think there are some life lessons in there. I mean, it's a book about resilience. It's a book about not backing down. It's a book about being in the moment, being around great moments, being around some tragic moments. I've been around them all. But I think also it's about having a real perspective in the grand scheme of things. It's only sports, as we know, but it's also a good metaphor for life. And through the years, I've been able to meet so many great people. And, this book is littered with, there's a lot of name dropping. Let's put it, okay, just go right ahead. There's a lot of name dropping, but the name dropping is there for a reason because it references these great, great athletes that I've had a chance to meet who, just like you and I, Neil, are absolutely human beings. And you've seen it. You worked at the NHL Network. You've been around all of that, and they're all the same. Everybody has their failures, their foibles, their successes, their achievements, accomplishments. But I think the people that I've met along the path have been great teammates. And to me, that's really what this game has kind of always been about in sports: having a great teammate, having someone have your back, having someone else's back. And it's something that's not a natural thing. I think it's something that you learn from somebody else along the way, and you go, you know what? We are better together. So, yeah, as far as a hook, I think there's just a lot of hooks in this one.
For sure. And Jim Lang helped with it, and he's a fellow broadcaster. And how did he help put the puzzle pieces together? I know you said that's a quote you used. How did him being a broadcaster, I'm trying to think back, because we've had him on the podcast. We've had Brian Berard, who he's worked with, but I don't know if he's ever done a book with another broadcaster. So how did he help you as a broadcaster?
You know what? What I love about Jim, first of all, obviously being in the business and a great, great person. And I was solo for, probably past halfway of this project, and kind of ran into some walls, and I got really busy, and I kind of needed somebody right from the beginning. And it was probably a stubbornness on my part that I really wanted to get this through. And I am a bit of a perfectionist that way. But at the same time, I realized, if I'm going to get this done, I'm going to need some help. And so Jim hopped on board, and how he put the pieces together is that he kind of stayed out of the way. And, he half of the book was probably, he kind of, got rid of some of the stuff that, there's a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. There could be cut to many blacks in this thing, because there's a lot of stories that we didn't get in. Maybe there'll be a sequel, who knows? But I think he was a really good source for me, because we have the same kind of mentality in telling stories as broadcasters, because it's really in my voice. He has a great ability to cut through the stuff that we don't need, and get the stuff, get to the stories, get to the punchlines. One thing on broadcasters, we don't like unlike most writers or literary people or journalists, we have a tendency to shorten everything, and these stories can get long. And so he was really good at that. He was really good at my book kind of jumps a little bit for reasons. that it's not really it's a chronicle, but not really a chronicle. But I like the way it jumps, and I think we kind of went through it together. And he was a really good teammate. He was a really good winger, and he would kind of call me off of some things, and I, would say this is kind of the direction I'd like to go. And he was really amenable to that, and I admire his patience and persistence with that, and Simon and Schuster's as well, and Brian Wood, because when I first started, Neil, you probably hear this a lot. When I first started the book, I kind of thought of it as a chronicle, but I realized if I went chronically, this book's going to take forever because I've just I got a lot of stories, right? And I've been around so many other things, but I think he was really good at capturing the highlights, and together we were able to craft this manuscript that I think again, has some really interesting, funny, tear-jerking, and also I think inspiring moments to it.
Well, it all started, with radio impressions, and then there's a roller skating rink and a hotel bar in Winnipeg. Yeah. How did those three, we can focus right there for now. How did those three places, or, well, I guess 2 places and your impressions allow you to hone your future vocal chops? Well,
it goes to show you there's no straight path, right? And so, when I was a kid, I never dream about sitting here doing an interview, talking about a book after broadcasting and still broadcasting for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. Things kind of just happen, but I think there is a real path and direction when you kind of get motivated at a young age and you have breaks and you're not afraid. I was never afraid. I sure got stage fright and I got all of these other things that went on with every broadcaster, but you get through that. And I had it actually, I think one of the things that never made the book is that when I was like 8, I was a MC for a band. I played in a little band that we traveled all around Manitoba, and I kind of introduced the band, and I played drums, and we had some talented musicians. We played all over, but we were like this little Brady Bunch. It was a family, and I wasn't part of the family, but I was the MC. And that kind of started the path of where I felt comfortable talking in front of crowds. But make no mistake, my whole youth was bent around sports. I played every day. I was just, my dream was to be a pro athlete. And obviously this is the next best thing. But I think the impressions, again, were part and parcel of the MC thing. I loved, SNL. I loved the Impressionists. For whatever reason, I could mimic all my teachers. So I started calling into radio stations at a young age, and people thought it was like some guy who was 40 years old. And, I was like 12, and I met the DJ, this famous DJ named Don Percy, and he couldn't believe it was me. So that kind of gave me more comfortability, more confidence. The next thing, I get a roller rink job. I was supposed to be a skate guard, but I thought this DJ thing's kind of cool. I'll do that. So I did the DJ thing, and I really enjoyed it. And I really loved playing music and entertaining crowds. And that, again, I didn't know. I mean, those were kind of the footsteps to this career that was going to happen around the corner. And I was still playing sports. Then I get this job at a bar playing music, mostly weekend nights, but also, as you'll find out in the book, I'm not going to give it away, something called the Jamboree, which was very interesting. Those in the know. And then, just having opportunities in sports, and then realizing that maybe my best opportunity was probably in communications, either as a radio announcer. Wasn't thinking about becoming a TV sports announcer. Not that I didn't want to. I just didn't think it was possible at such a young age. And lo and behold, I went to a school in Manitoba, and next thing I know, after my first year, I got lucky and I got this job interview, won the job, and never finished school. I eventually did get my diploma, but it was like such a lucky break. And I really, I got breaks along the way, but I made my breaks. And I think that's what you've interviewed so many authors, especially in the sports world. And I'm sure everybody says the same thing. You make your breaks and you got to be ready. And I always tell kids, be ready. Just put tools in your toolbox, have them ready. And someday you're going to need those tools. And whether it's in broadcasting, even if the broadcasting thing didn't work out, you're going to have to use those communication skills somewhere. And I do believe our world is, full of good communicators, and it needs more great communicators. So, and that's really kind of what makes the world spin. And all of those little things were really formative, and they were just steps along the path for me. And again, did I know that was going to lead to something? I kind of hoped, but not in a million years did I think that that would happen. But I now look back at that formula; it worked.
It's very interesting what you just said about there's a lot of good communicators and a lot of great communicators. And I'm imagining that is kind of a comment on the proliferation of what we've seen, right? I mean, there used to be gatekeeping, and there was rightly and wrongly a way to kind of move up. And now anyone can do it. So is that kind of when you say that, there's good communicators, but great communicators?
No, I just think I'm not even just thinking on, hey, listen, I have the line I said a long time ago, and this is not a reflection of your podcast, because I think your podcast is good and you're a good communicator, but I always said, and I am probably going to mount a podcast soon. I had one for a while, didn't like the direction of it. I probably want to get a good one out there, because we don't really have a great Canadian podcast, and I think that's what we're going to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Why in Canada do we listen to Rogan and Conan O'Brien and Bill Maher? We don't listen to Canadian podcasts. Why? Because we don't have any. We don't have any ones that they're not marketing, and our communications companies aren't doing that. But I always say that podcasts are like buttholes. Everybody's got one, and it's the better looking buttholes that actually get listened to, not for flatulence, but get noticed. So when I say good communicators, I don't just mean that on podcasts and broadcasting, but I think that's fantastic, everybody, because you can pick and choose now. Everybody can do it. I do think there should be some regulation, especially in social media, with what's going on. AI kind of scares me a little bit, but having said that, you've got to embrace AI or you're going to be left behind. I would say there's not good communication within our leadership, our politicians, our business people. I can't tell you how many times, and again, I'm just a broadcaster, that I get hauled into some major Canadian company to do a seminar with their executives, who really just are great leaders, great executives. They're just not great communicators. So my thing with all of that, and I do a lot of that now, is I wherever you are, and I can tell anybody this, and I do it at schools too. If you're starting you think you're a 3 or you're at a 3 out of 10, I'm going to make you I'm not going to get you 10, but I'll make you 7. I'll get you to 7, because there's some, there's some fundamental communication tools that everybody needs to tell stories properly, and to make sure that they enunciate properly, make sure they use the spoken word properly, the proper language, not ebonics or, slang. That can be used at times. Anyway, I do think that we need more great communicators out there. And we've seen them. There's great orators. Like, you've seen what the Barack Obama's, Bill Clinton was a great one. I think Mark Carney's very good at what he does. Hillary Clinton was really good at what she's done. And here I go talking about Americans. And again, it's too bad. But I do find they're also trained, and they also are very good at speaking on teleprompters.
Yeah. When
they get off, including one certain president right now, what I'm talking about. He's doing it all the time. He's doing it to get so off. He's the guy who, quite frankly, needs to stay on teleprompter.
How much of what you just said, if we just travel back a few seconds ago, what you mentioned about like the U.S. doing it first, I mean, so much of that, I think, is based on how close we are to the U.S. that we just kind of let them take the lead, right? If we were Norway, we wouldn't say, take our hockey games and we'll take your feed, right? We'd be doing our own hockey games, because you can watch a playoff hockey game right now with the rights holder who's taking the feed from the U.S., right?
We've done it forever, Neil. You know that, right? You worked at the NHL network. Where were your feeds coming in? Where was the network? Where was the studio? In Canada.
Then I moved to New Jersey.
I would love to see us, and it's not going to happen. We're good at producing hockey. We're really good at producing hockey. We started producing, and we're good at Blue Jay baseball. We got really good at that because we cared about it. And why? Because a communications company owns it. But we're taking a lot of properties and putting them on on our sports networks, and I include all of them, that are brought in via stream, some from somewhere else. We're using their announcers, or if we use our announcers don't travel, and we're doing it out of studio. And we're doing it cheaply because we can, but I think it's wrong. I think we should, if I had one, and trust me, I'm really seriously considering this and working with people, I'd like to start another sports network. A sports network in Canada that streams amateur sports that are underserved in Canada for the people who would like to watch, and those groups that would like to watch were, U Sport, Canadian Baseball League, Canadian Elite Basketball League, going on and on. There's so many. Our sports networks are great in Canada, but we air pro sports, and we don't air local sports. We need to get back to that. I really fear that we're past that, and we don't hear about our stars until when?
They're pros.
Until they're pros. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I broadcast Shea Gilgeous-Alexander he was in high school at the BioSteel game. I remember him was like 6'2". He wasn't that 6'6", 6'7" that he is now. And he only had, I think, 1 point in the game. And he was a name to watch, but Luguentz Dort was actually the guy who was the MVP. But we aired that at the time. But I think if more networks aired those up-and-comers, we don't have to wait till they become pro and we go, hey, who's SGA? And SGA arguably is more famous in the United States than he is in Canada. Joey Votto was more famous in the United States than he is in Canada. Marty St. Louis was more famous in the United States until he became the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. And they're a monster down there. Trust me, they're good at. We've got to get better at telling our Canadian stories, our Canadian athletes, and not wait till they become professionals. And we've got to produce more. We have to produce more sports instead of just having it gift wrapped. And then also have this proliferation of pseudo sports that are on the sports networks. They're not real sports. So what are we doing? And we have more, by the way, we have more sports networks, national sports networks, than they have in the United States, in Canada. Because think about all the channels, right? But and again, listen, I work for I still do work for TSN and Sportsnet and CBC, and I'm not slagging anybody. I just think we got to find a way. I don't know if it's the government or sponsorship. We got to work harder at calling our own games, taking it to the level of hockey. We spend so much money on hockey, and yeah, the money talks. But I grew up in an era, I'm sure you did, where you watched ski jumping on a Saturday afternoon. You watched rowing. It was on. And how does a kid get inspired? I'm not thinking selfishly as a broadcaster. I'm thinking about athletes. How does a kid pick up? How does Adam Vancouverden become a kayaker? He saw somebody kayaking, probably on TV somewhere. Silken Laman, a rower. How does Elvis Stoico become a skater? You saw it on TV. And I fear that, the only ones that are with only hockey and maybe the main core four sports, that's where kids are going to gravitate to. There's so many other sports out there, and we need our kids to play more sports. Sorry, that was a long dissertation.
No, it's good, and we're going to get into that too. No, I wonder if it's a case, and this ties into also another question I want to ask you later. But I made a documentary, self-funded, and I found it landed on Amazon Prime. But in making it, I found that a lot of people that do make films here rely and wait for some funding from somewhere else, which is what you should do. But I'm tying that into, I guess, with sports and with the bigger companies here. Is it just a matter of like, hey, like we don't want to we're just risk averse here, right? I mean, we're risk averse, and maybe we're comparing ourselves to an American market that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to. It's the biggest market in the world. We're not even in that conversation, right?
Great point. But hey, think about again, let's go. When were you at NHL Network? That was about 10 years ago?
09 to till it left to go to New Jersey.
Okay, so think about that time.
Yeah.
Think about how hard it was to broadcast. Think about how if you and I were going to have an interview, you'd have to get a satellite truck. You'd have to get a camera. We'd do a fake double ender, which were crazy. You'd actually do a double ender, then you come back and redo the questions. Think about how far we've progressed with technology. The technology is there to do it simply off of computers. And I'm not saying this sports network that I'm proclaiming, this streaming sports network is going to be network quality, but it's going to be close because of the ability to have these cams, these robotic cams that are out there now, and to let young kids broadcast them, and people just want to see their sport broadcast and broadcast properly. Like where you're not just one big wide. Like I had a kid who was playing baseball a few years ago in Dawson Community College in Montana, and I just wanted to see him. And all it was a cell phone behind a plate, and I watched him, and there was no audio. I just could watch the game, but I want to see my kid. And I looked on that stream that one day, and they had over 500 people watching.
Yeah.
500 people watching off of a cell phone that didn't even have cuts, didn't even have angles. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think, we look at the States, we look at these great broadcast entities that are able to, it's slick, it looks good, it's got the music. I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be, we're at an age of technology where we can do it much cheaper. You can cut openings. I'm a big believer in still cutting openings and features, not having every 2 seconds something about a betting line or an intermission where they're talking about the odds. How about stories about the athletes again? I'd really like to see that. I really would.
Well, the thing with that is you got a lot of times it's there, but the sponsor will, you need a sponsor to fund it. So that it changes the whole,
betting sponsor.
Yeah. Betting sponsor or, grocery store, and it changes maybe the way you're going after it. You're in your life story, in anyone's life story, there's turning points, and you have a turning back point. You were on your way to try out for Division II basketball at Bemidji State, but turned the car around.
It was actually weird. It was a scouting. It was a scouting trip, and again, it just came out of the blue off of a phone call. But it was, I think I might have been the first ever basketball hockey player, because it was kind of to try out for both. And I was on my way down, not sure what kind of offer. It was different then. Scholarships now. My kids played NCAA, and they, that is a recruitment process. You talk over the phone. You send videos. There was no video back then. We didn't have Polaroid pictures of our games, but a scout had seen me at a camp. So I was on my way down. It was probably about a 5-6 hour trip to Bemidji, and got over the border. I remember being up late, working the bar and the roller rink, and my good friend, Graham, who was driving me down in his little Honda Civic. We got over the border, and for some reason, I just had this kind of an epiphany that, and he kind of talked me into it too. He said, we were talking about it, and he said, you're you've already got a college scholarship. You're already a pro. You're doing stuff in the communication industry. You're getting paid and paid well, by the way, as a teenager, to do this. And I thought, I still love sports, though. I love to play. And it didn't take too much convincing. We were about 45 minutes, maybe an hour into Minnesota. And I said, you know what? You're right. And we went home. And that was the turning back point. And I went home and I had already enrolled in Red River Community College. I had to do an interview thing, but it wasn't a broadcast. It was more writing in that, but it was the closest thing to broadcast. I essentially got in. I was very young, but I just didn't think it was still, when you're an athlete, you're an athlete. It's like a coach. A coach is always a coach. And I just wanted to play. To this day, I still love to play, whatever it is. I'm still, the older I get, the better I was, but still, I still had that kind of dream in the back of my head. And then I turned around and I never looked back. And then things really started to fall into place once I did that. And it was hard. College was hard because I was working at the time, and, my marks weren't great, and I was working late nights, but it certainly was, looking back over 40 years ago. I guess 35 years ago, 40 years ago. 45 years ago, I would say it was probably the best thing I ever did.
But you kind of got to live out that dream in two ways, because you got to go on and be at the top of your field over your career, which is ongoing. And then your son becomes the
Yeah.
Major League Baseball player.
Yeah.
So I mean, that must have been almost a satisfaction in two fronts, because you may have gone on to some sort of success in sports, but your son did it and you got the broadcasting.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of cool. Again, we have 4 kids, and they all played sports. And my wife's, was an athlete. Her dad was a former Boston Bruin. My dad tried out with the Rangers. So we were all just a big sports family. My kids always played. They were always around my broadcasts. I brought them around, number one, because I wanted them to be around it. Number two, it was cheaper than babysitting. I didn't have to pay for the babysitting, so I just brought them. It kind of drove our producers crazy because my kids would run around all over the place, except at baseball, where Tyler, my oldest, and Brody, my second oldest, would always sit in the booth with Pat Tabler or Joe Carter and I, and would sit there and watch. And they just loved the game. And I found that really interesting. And every time we did games, that's kind of how they got the love of baseball. They were hockey players, but they loved baseball. And trust me, I had no, there's no assumption that my kids were going to be pro athletes, or, it's not like this sports dad who, I just wanted my kids to enjoy it. You never know where the chips fall. I did want them to get a good education out of it, which they did. And sure enough, that for them, it happened. And I always tell people, I didn't have enough time. I coached them, but I didn't have, and I, worked out with them a lot, but I didn't have enough time to coach teams because I was always away. But I always put them with good coaches. And I say that to parents. It's not, where they're going to learn about the game. They're going to learn about life. And so Tyler got that. Brody got that. Brody's playing in the CBL now. And Tyler got that. And, to have him drafted in Major League Baseball was absolutely incredible moment. I mean, to get a scholarship, first of all, then, all the little steps, kind of like what you said, like it was kind of like, the little things that fall in your path. And for me, the same kind of things. You build muscle or whatever. You kind of muscle you're building in whatever you do. And then sure enough, Tyler got an opportunity to go south, college, got drafted, excelled in college, got drafted in the first round. And then, when you get the call up, that was quite amazing. And it still seems surreal. And, he's been up a few times, back and forth. He's going to be a great big league player someday. He's going to get his chance. And he, that opening night was a dream for my wife and I. It took us forever to get there, but we got there. And who would have known too? Of course, I got a big mouth. So I knew that reporter was going to come up and talk to us, because they always do to the parents when the kids are making their debut. And he already had a double. So I knew that was going to happen. And we didn't have our phones with us, which was really weird because we were in such a rush. We left them in the car. So I didn't know what was happening. And things were going kind of viral. And I got back, I had like 5,000 messages and texts, and I stayed up all night kind of answering them. But it was, people asked me, and I think I'm sure I said it in the book, is that, I've been lucky enough to call the Olympics, World Championships, and Cups, and majors, and incredible events. But there's nothing like calling that for my son. That was really, really special.
You called, just to let the listeners know, you called Tyler's first hit, I believe, was it?
Second hit. So first hit was a double. Yeah. Got into the game, and his second hit, they were interviewing me, and she asked me to call it, and I didn't want to, just in case he got hit in the head or struck out or something. Because then I'd say, me, I'd say, well, there he is, just like me. He sucks. He struck out, but he didn't, and he got another hit. And then I said, there's a base hit for my boy, Tyler Black. There you go, there you go. And I said, it was my wife's birthday. Happy birthday, Nancy. And then, of course, the line that was online, the line that was online for a while, is that the reporter, Sophia Minert, said, well, look, it's a great night for the Black family. You can see the tears in their eyes. They're having a good time. And I said, yeah, this is great. I think we're going to start drinking heavily. Anyway, and hey, again, no grand illusion that anybody's going to make it or be there. But I want to tell you, you got kids?
No.
If you want to buy one, I'll send you one. I love all my kids. Trust me. But for people who have kids, or even relatives or people who are close to you, there's nothing better than seeing anybody achieve in their life a dream come true. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if it's sports. It could be arts. My daughter's an actress and a singer, and there's no prouder dad in the world, and watching her on stage. My other boy, who's amazing at, crafting his future and whatever he does, same kind of thing. And Jesse, he's, everybody loves this kid. And same thing with you, when they accomplish something that is special. It is exactly what you want as a parent. The only thing in your life, the only time that you ever want somebody to do something better than you,
Yes.
even though I like when anybody does it, is your kids, is when your kids can do that.
And Tyler, we should say, was with the Milwaukee Brewers franchise. I did have a quick question, because I imagine he spent most of his time in Ontario, and normally we think of Canadian ball players as coming out of BC. You mentioned, the good coaches you put him with, and then you mentioned Paul Spoljaric, Rob Butler, and Robbie Alomar helping him out. How did they help him out, kind of get from here to there?
Well, Rob Butler ruined my suit in the World Series in 1993. Just look it up on YouTube, the interview, which was still my favorite interview of all. Post-victory celebrations, he poured a beer and champagne over my head. And Robbie was, played in East York, but he, his family's from out east, and they have a town called Butlerville, and they were all watching in Butlerville and Newfoundland and Labrador. And he, we just became friends for a long time. And that would have been, 93, Ty was born in 2000. So fast forward, probably 2008, Rob had always, after he, quit baseball, he never quit baseball. He just kept coaching and training kids and developing young players he wanted to be like himself and his brother Rich, who both got to the big leagues. And I knew where I wanted to send my kids was to Rob and Rich, and that's where they went, to Home Run Academy and Ajax. And my boys loved it because they were around big league players, and they treated them like big league players. And then Paul Spoljaric was all part of that as well. And Spally was kind of one of the first that really said, Tyler's he's a pretty special player. He's about 12 years old, and he said, we can travel with this team. And then Robbie Alomar, the T12s, Tyler was young, and Robbie Alomar, even said then, your boy is going to be a good player, man. He's going to be a good player. So, I had all these guys. He always, again, he was lucky. He got to be around these really good coaches who had been in the majors, who knew what the path was like, and he never took shortcuts. This kid, he never took shortcuts, and nor does my other son Brody, who's on that path too. They just learned so much. They got up at, even now when they're home, I'll get, Dad, you want to throw? Can you come throw to us? I'll throw to them. But I used to get up at 5:30 in the morning in the winter, and they nudge me. I'm going, can you come? We're going to go to the facility before school.
Right.
And they'd hit for like an hour and a half and then go to school. And as a dad, of course, I'd rather sleep in, especially I'd done a Raptor game the night before, probably got home around 2.
Yeah.
But having coaches, having mentors, having leaders around you, surround yourself with the best people and learn from them. I was lucky enough in my broadcast career, and I think that resonates in the book. It's that I have worked with more color commentators and analysts than anybody on the planet. I guarantee you, because I did every sport. And I was going to actually have a chapter, and I think we ran out of pages, with listing all of them, including Richard Zolkel,
yes,
who I worked with in all my golf. And it's hundreds of people. And I can tell you, not one of them, came in and mailed it in. Not one of them. They all worked hard. They were all great people. They were friends for life. There are very few jerks. I did work with a couple of dicks, but I learned from them too. You got to learn from the good and the bad. So just like the baseball, I think that was a real, for me, being around really good people. I owe my career to all of the people that I've been around, and I've learned everything from it.
Well, you do a pretty good job of mentioning a lot of them. And please keep me honest on time. I have several more questions, but I don't want to spend
that's okay. I'm good.
Your entire day answering questions from me. But I like to look at it as a conversation anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So you go from local TV in Winnipeg to CTV, and this is a time when the industry's shifting. So you take a pay cut, but aside from that, The industry, and I've heard a little bit about it. I'm old enough to kind of heard about the old days and the kind of the anchorman atmosphere. What was it like living in that transition and making your own transition during this time when TV is becoming more, I guess, I don't want to call it more professional, but more sanitized, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good word. Sanitize is a really good word. Woke is another good word.
Yeah. Well, that maybe followed a little bit later.
Well, yeah, woke. I think it's woke, but I think it. We got two worlds now. There's a dividing line between the sanitized world of broadcast. I say TV, radio, and then the podcast / streaming, which essentially there's the Wild West, right?
Yes.
It was Neil. It was different. It was very structured back then too.
Right.
But for me, it was great because we didn't have the internet. We had wire service, and you had to be a storyteller, and you had to tap dance a lot. You really had to ad lib a lot. And I come to air with highlights. I wouldn't even have a script written. I didn't have time to write a script, so I would just call games, call the highlights as I saw them, which could be chaotic at times and drove my directors nuts. But I wanted to have as many highlights on the air back then as possible. I didn't just want to come on the air and have a score, which a lot of broadcasters did. I wanted highlights, and I dug, and I'm telling you, I'm sure I broke every CRTC rule about what highlight you can bring in. Trust me, at CKY, I'm sure there's a statute of limitations now. I don't think they can sue me now, but I scalped highlights from every imaginable source.
Right.
And I made sure that if there were 10 games that night, I wanted highlights from all 10 games. And I think we were probably the first local station to even do that, even as a network, way before TSN. We did it. And it took a lot of work, but it was crazy. But at the same time, it was the kind of the anchorman, back then structure, big manual typewriters. You had to roll big videotape that was they would roll in the back, often would stop rolling. Chiron, which they call Chiron, the graphic generator, which you had to put in yourself, and you often didn't put the right score in. You had to do it by yourself. You had a good crew, but it was different. It was so different. I am glad I lived through it. Whiteout. You had to have a lot of whiteout.
Yeah.
Because that's how it worked.
Yeah.
And we didn't have teleprompters probably until I started in 81, 82. So we probably didn't have, I would say probably the next 3 years, then we started using teleprompters, and we'd always, you'd look down. But I just kind of went with it. I didn't like having a teleprompter. And now everything's written. There are a lot of readers, which is fine. It looks good. You probably want somebody looking right in the camera all the time, and they come in. Studies have shown that's the way it looks, and more lighting. But it was a really cool time to be around it. And there were some real CRTC rules, stuff you couldn't say and do.
Yeah.
At the time, like you could say, I'm just going you can say, even if what I said earlier about butthole, you could never say butthole on the air back there. You couldn't say ass. You couldn't say, there's still probably a lot of words you still probably can't say.
Right.
They kicked the snot out of them. You couldn't say that. You probably, you hear from the news director. You couldn't be. There was certain terminology you just couldn't use. And then, of course, the terminology has changed big time now, like stuff that we never would have said back then, which means something different now.
Well, what about the idea of beyond the, I guess, the technical and kind of the visual of what you're describing as the anchorman? I'm talking more of the, you mentioned that time you're doing gymnastics and there was guys in the production truck lit up. Like there was a lot more. And it's interesting because just in kind of re-asking this question, I think that this Wild West pre-sanitized era almost is what, as my friend Barry Duller told me, who was a longtime TV, you might have ran into Barry Duller. Yeah. He said what TV is now, or what the internet now is what TV was. Yeah, kind of.
Well, it was because as many rules as there was, especially in sports, there weren't rules, and we were kind of the wacky. You could have a personality in sports. News you couldn't. You had to be kind of that straight-laced person. I always enjoyed doing late night because games were fresh. And I always was working with an anchor who really we had a great connection with, whoever that might be, and we'd make it fun. We would make it fun. We'd have fun on the air. Now, news stories are serious, of course, but when it came to sports, we let it go. But little things, like you said, there were, when I was growing up in Winnipeg, it was the old McDonald CKY broadcast with Cactus Jack Wells and Stu McPherson. Mm-hmm. And they would do the sports smoking a cigarette. Now, little did I know, but also the Cactus Jack had a reputation, and I love that man. He was such a wonderful man, just a legend in Winnipeg, and I loved him so much. His son was John Wells. Richard is the director. Mm-hmm. Cactus, so I just had this thing for him. He was such a nice man, but Cactus liked to imbibe. He liked to have a few, and he'd have a few shots, I think, on the air. One time I was sitting in my office, late night, getting ready for a broadcast, and I kind of put my feet on the desk. Everything was done, laid out, and I kind of leaned back and hit a Beta machine, Betamax machine, and it knocked into the wall, and it pushed up. They were brick walls. We were in the basement of CKY TV, and it pushed a brick in the wall, into the wall, and it fell down. I went, "That's weird. How did that happen?" Like, absolutely stone brick wall, but this brick falls through it the other way. So I try to dig the brick out, and then inside there's probably about 25 empty liquor bottles. So that's where they were hiding their stash way back when. And so it was different. It was different. It was like the Wild West, but again, we didn't have the technology or the access to highlights. Those guys and it was very opinionated. Even us, sports writers, and I'm sure you've had a lot of them on back then, wrote the story, hit deadline, and it was a story on the game.
Yes.
You don't hear that anymore. Everybody knows it's all opinionated now. But the next day, those writers who did the game story were doing opinion stories. So they always had their own column, and some of the great sports writers through the years, Dick Beddoes, go through them all, Red Fisher, Stan Fischler, Jack Matheson in Winnipeg, Gord Sinclair, Scott Young. They all had their own opinionated.
Right.
But it was the day after. Right. But now it's like that. Now everybody, you got to have a take. You got to have a hot take. You got to be Stephen A. Smith.
You're Mr. Versatile. So let me just switch gears quickly, and I want to ask you about figure skating. One of the sports you're known for amongst the many you've done. How explain to Canadians how big of a broadcast property this is, and kind of how Johnny Esau saw that earlier on before anyone else did? Because I've worked on I think 7 Olympics now, maybe 4 Winter Olympics, and we know, because we're on the other end of it, how massive figure skating is worldwide, and not only here but worldwide.
Yeah, And you're right, but I'm just going to correct one thing you said.
Okay.
How popular figure skating was on TV. It's hardly on anymore. Now it's only big events. Now you're right. Olympics. Mm-hmm.
World Championships, maybe.
Somewhat world champ. But I'm going to tell you, back then, skating was on all the time. And I think what actually it suffered from is oversaturation.
Okay.
It was on too much. We were honestly on too much. And then, of course, the scandals hurt. But I also think, this is not a hot take. I think the association, the Skating Association in Canada, hasn't helped itself through the years. Johnny Esau was the pioneer in skating. Johnny Esau, Dick Button in the United States. Johnny Esau put skating on television, and he made it popular when, the 3-channel universe, and people watched. And then I was lucky enough to come in, early 90s. 1990 was my first skating event. Kind of watched it a little bit, obviously reported on it, from the Olympics in 84 and 88. But wasn't really a big fan of it per se, because I was more of a hockey head, self-admittedly. But I fell in love with it when I get there. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the sport, how athletic they are. It wasn't just this ballet on ice, even though it was artistic. I also actually fell in love with the controversy. I fell in love with the judges. I fell in love with the fact that there were this. When I say fell in love, I loved being the guy who was the Simon Cowell of broadcasting in terms of knocking the judges, because that my analysts really couldn't.
Right.
I didn't mind saying that was a terrible mark. And I got it. I heard it from the judges, hated me, but that's okay. I'm honest. I'm going to say that was, I'm not a skater, but that clearly is, and the old judging system was, let's say 7 judges, 4-3. You look at where their passport was, because we put flags underneath, and the Eastern Bloc was always more operatic, artistic. We were more rock and roll here, a little bit more and athletic. And I always saw it. But I think it created that people like, well, so you watch, you want to, they hated the judges too. And then I lived through Harding Kerrigan, and I saw the popularity of, the skaters were rock stars. Elvis Stoico, Kurt Browning, Saleh and Pelche, Born and Kratz, Virtue and Moyer, go through all the lists, Joanny Rochette, you name, whoever it was at the time, they were absolute superstars everywhere they went. We'd fill, when I say we, Canadian skating would fill buildings, 18,000 people. Neil, this is not an exaggeration. On Saturday night, if we had a skating event, whether it was Skate Canada, national championships, or worlds, consistently outrated Hockey Night in Canada. Now, again, a huge female audience, but it was astounding to me. Everywhere it was incredible. And then something happened. I think, I do believe the scandals really hurt it, for sure. Then the new judging system, which was put in place to prevent scandals, which was really effective, but it took it took people, the average person away who went, no, that's better. That's, like seriously, you got 5 skaters, you look at them, you rank them 1 to 5. But this was now an algorithm and a total. And I think it's still today a little confusing. They had to do it because they had to separate. But having said that, there's one mark, artistic impression, that is subjective. It's not fine line. So there's still going to be controversy. People love that stuff. So, it's not on as much as it once was. And I think there should be a hybrid, a little bit more than they had. It's streamed a lot more now too. It's become one of those sports that needs to be on a new sports network. Like I told you, that sort of sport that is underserved. Who would have thought it's underserved? But we can honestly thank Johnny Esau, had the stones to make it a national property, make it a huge TV ratings property, around the world, signing deals. And he loved the sport. And I was lucky enough to be this guy who was a hockey head, who came in and followed it along and then fell in love with it.
Well, I think you nailed it too. You mentioned the ratings numbers, comparing it to hockey. It is wildly popular. And I don't think I won't say many people know it, but I think you almost got to be in sports to know that.
Yeah.
Couple quick ones for you. Let me go back here to, okay. Well, I found this very interesting, and it's going to lead to my next question. How did CTV Sports Presents allow you to flex your broadcast muscle?
Well, frankly, I came from doing sports every day. And I was at Groundhog Day, and I love it. I still, to this day, I'd like to do sports every day. I'd like to broadcast every day. And they called me Game of Day Black. I loved doing games every day, and it keeps you fresh. So when I came to CTV, after going every single day, I'd work 6-7 days a week at CKY, and I loved it, doing the sports. I loved calling sports events. I wasn't a caller. I wasn't a play-by-play, but I was, a reporter. Then came to CTV, and, we'd have big events, but they were very sporadic. We didn't have what CBC had at the time. They were the machine. We had the Olympics. We had tennis. We had golf. We had skating. We had Blue Jay baseball, but it was only on Wednesday and Saturdays. We had Expo baseball. And still, that seems like a lot, but there were a lot of periods where I wasn't busy for 2 weeks, and that for me, 2 weeks is a long time. So I supplemented that by doing some freelance work, and I do that in the States. Or what I would do is do Canada AM, sports on Canada AM, which flexes some muscle there too, which I liked. And then CTV Sports Presents came along. It was a Saturday afternoon show up against Sports Weekend on CBC. So it was kind of this, it was an adjunct of what we had before. We just couldn't call it Wide World of Sports. Johnny had bought that as well. Johnny Esau had already bought that. We didn't call it Wide World of Sports, but it was kind of the sports that
Right.
they don't get a lot of attention. We would have speed skating. We would have, I guess if it was today, we'd have pickleball and, dodgeball and things like that, and darts. It was cool, but they were also properties that were heavily taped. We'd have events that were taped like 2 years earlier, lawn bowling, for instance, and we'd try to make it look live. But it allowed us to have a show, and then we were also live. If something broke that day, we could be live on the air and tell everybody. And I that's what I really liked.
Just give me the years kind of time frame of where CTV Sports Presents lives.
So I would say probably after.
You can even go
I'd
decade.
say after the Barcelona games, 1992.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong on this. 1993 maybe, until CTV. Once CTV started buying sport, until CTV bought Sportsnet.
98.
I think 98. So probably 5 years.
I'm going to tell you something funny. I work on a show every weekend called CBC Sports Presents, and I had no idea that that name came from somewhere else.
Well, it used to be that show, CBC Sports Presents.
Yeah. Was
CBC Sports Weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian Williams on CBC Sports. So we were up against Sports Weekend.
Yeah.
So CBC Sports Presents. So CTV Sports Presents. Yeah. At the time, I'm going like, why are we calling it this? I mean, anyway, it's not. There's no presents. Are we getting gifts? But no, it became its own entity, and I really enjoyed doing it. And we did a lot of auto racing too. We did a lot of auto racing, and it was up against. We'd show the Triple Crown of horse racing. It'd be there, part of CTV Sports Presents. I want to say it might have even been earlier, because it might have been just before the '92 Barcelona games. I think we used the term because every event we did was CTV Sports Presents.
Yeah, something.
And then Saturday was the Saturday. Then it became a show on Saturday. But we did the Ben Johnson comeback race before the Barcelona games as well. That's interesting. It's crazy. I didn't know this, and maybe I haven't been watching CBC Sports Presents because I saw that the other day and went, holy cow, they stole our name.
Yeah. Well, I remember because we were called Road to the Olympic Games, and then they changed it. And I said, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then when I was reading the book, I said, hold on, did I see this right? And that leads me to just quickly ask you, you share your thoughts, very analytical and balanced thoughts on the corporation, meaning CBC. Since they lost the Hockey Night rights in 2014, I believe it was, do you feel like the landscape has shifted to where kind of everyone's kind of closer to working together as opposed to being rivals? For example, there's a lot more intermingling during the games, especially between all three networks, TSN, SportsLit, and CBC.
The day that changed was the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, the consortium, when TSN, CTV, and Sportsnet all worked together, and we all worked together. I think, and moving forward, that's probably the best way. And now Olympics, CBC also knows, even though they're the mighty machines still, and by the way, still do sports. They produce sports tremendously. And I'm critical of the CBC. I'm not critical of the CBC or the people who work there. I'm critical of what's happened to CBC sports through the years because of money, and because it's publicly funded. And on a Saturday afternoon, I know there's tons of trucks that are available. And I do believe I would give CBC here's my thing. I give CBC the Olympics every year or whenever it comes around, because that's what they do really well. They've always done that. And by the way, it's amateur sports, kind of funded, so CBC has the Olympics now, and they farm it off now they use CTV or TSN. And I think they did use TSN, CTV, Sportsnet, because they don't have the bandwidth, which is fine. So that's good. The only thing I noticed about the last Olympics is that it was really tough to find. I know they're pushing people to places. It's really tough to find everybody. And now you're going to go online, and you got to find your sport online. I thought that, was it the GEM app? I think it was the GEM app during the Olympics. I thought it was actually very good this time. I can't be critical. I thought that was good. You can find your sport. But when it goes to different networks, everybody's kind of trying to bring their own property in. But at the same time, I think that when the shift happened, that polar shift happened, where everybody started working together, and the funding, quite frankly, didn't happen for CBC as much. I just know that on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday afternoon where youth sports is being played and amateur sports is being played in Canada, and I don't want to get off on a soapbox. I'd say this if I was working at, and I do work for all the networks,
Right.
On a freelance basis. We have got to be better showing those sports. That's the prime time. So yeah, a young kid can see, and they can say, "Oh, I want to play for the Laurentian University team. I want to play for UBC someday." It's not about going to the States. I want to play in Dalhousie. We got to be better at showing more university, high school sports, staying local. That's what the CBC could be great at. I don't want to turn on the CBC or even an alternative. I know that Gem and Plus and all those are doing that. I don't want to turn off and watch Coronation Street or an American broadcast on a Saturday afternoon or a fishing show or something. God love them. That's prime time. When I was growing up, Neil, that's when I watched sports. Saturday and Sunday afternoon as a young kid, that's when I want to be, because I know, by the way, that CBC can dress those up and all our networks can dress those up and make them look good and be attractive to Canadian athletes.
On that note, I will say that I think CBC could probably promoting it. I think where to find it, and I do think a lot of it is online now. But I encourage you, and I feel like I'm blending two worlds here, and I'm trying to separate those. But I do encourage you to take a look on the weekend at CBC Sports Presents and let me know what you think.
No, you know what? I've watched the last, and one thing that they're doing is good at cross promotion and doing it. But again. They don't have the bandwidth, but we have all these sports networks in Canada. And so on a Saturday afternoon, I'm watching 10 different sports networks and CTV and CBC. CTV has some American show on. CBC could have something else on. Again, by the way, it's not just sports in Canada. We need to have our arts and everything else. But there should be a time frame. Like that's what Sports Weekend was about. But we have 10 sports networks that are showing the same thing. NCAA, we're showing on one of the Canadian sports networks on 4 channels, NCAA football or basketball, and we're not showing Canadian university basketball. By the way, anybody who's got a satellite can watch that NCAA game on ABC, CBS, or NBC. They can watch it on there. Why are we not? We got to be more pro-Canadian with this. And that's the way, when I was growing up, that's what we were. I loved Ted Reynolds and Ernie Afaganis and Brian Williams when I was growing up on the CBC with their bright orange, gaudy blazers, but they were covering diving championships at Pan Am Pool in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
They were covering equestrian at Spruce Meadows. Every weekend, there was something being broadcast. We have a lot of trucks out there, broadcast trucks, that are sitting in cobwebs, not broadcasting sports on weekends. And that's from all of our networks.
I'm going to ask one last question and I'll let you go. Okay.
That's a pretty big rant, huh?
No, like I said, I think I do encourage you to watch CBC Sports Presents. I think it has a lot of what you're looking for, but I don't know if I think there's been comments on, I don't know where to find it or that type of thing. And then that's across the board. So like I said, I'm trying to not blend my two worlds here because my podcast is separate from my day job.
No. Trust me when I say it. Listen, again, CBC's better at most everybody else at putting Canadian content on the air on those sports afternoons. I just think we got to put more of it on.
I'll ask you this, and by the way, for the record, because if people are listening, I also worked at TSN and at Sportsnet, so I worked at the Score.
And by the way, I work for them all too, and it's again, and if none of them, if they all know that what I'm saying is the truth. It's not. It's just. It honestly is. It's about money. It's about money and ratings and sponsorship. Because they're going to look. Well, we can't spend $50,000 to send a truck out there. I get that. Let's work harder at finding ways of doing that.
I do think, especially the local stuff you're talking about, like even let's not talk about a World Cup of diving, but even let's say a 12-year-old whatever AAA baseball game. I do think that is definitely something that we'll probably end up seeing more of for sure, or somehow. You mentioned the cell phone behind the plate, watching a game that way. Now, you said you'd love to make an Oscar award-winning sports doc potentially one day. Any ideas, any topics that you think of would make a good one, or is that just kind of like, hey, that's in the back of my mind. If something comes up, then I'll pursue it.
No, you know what? I've been thinking about it. There's so many out there. And honestly, again, there's so many great stories, Neil. CBC, TSN, SportsNet, CTV are all great. CHCH, Global are all great at telling the stories. We're in a 140 character, 2-minute universe, 15-second universe now. But I love sports documentaries. I think TSN has done a great job with their documentary, TSN Docs. CBC does the same. There are tons of stories out there. And I produced a few documentaries already, a couple that aren't related to sports, but there are some out there. To be an Oscar, I mean, it's so funny. You got to find tapes and you got to find that story. And you got to it's all about personal relationships. I know so many great athletes who want to tell their story now that are in retirement years or, riding off into the sunset. And there's some good stories there. There's so many great Canadian sports stories that you find that you go, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the Faulkner brothers from St. John's, Newfoundland were, one of the Faulkner brothers were the first guy from the Rock to play in the NHL, and he played with the superstars. I didn't know that. And I find them out every day. That we went up north recently with a bunch of NHLers to Delaney, Northwest Territories, and had a game on Great Bear Lake and put an NHL size rink on there and minus 40-degree weather. Those are great. And I don't think some of the sports docs that are out there that have won, When We Were Kings is one.
Yeah.
I don't think he thought about that about winning an Oscar.
Right.
I'm not saying that's the of all and end all, but there's so many good stories. If they're crafted properly, I would love to tell those stories. I like producing them. I like to I'm curious. I like to find out more about them, about the subject matter. And I just think, we're at an age now where we can revisit things like the Ben Johnson saga. Mm-hmm. What really, really happened? What really, really happened? I know that's been out there, but I want to know what really happened. I want to know more about the steroids in sports. We're getting removed a little bit. Right. I want to know more about the Pete Rose betting scandal, even though betting is all over the place and it's commonplace now. I want to know about those so that they can frame down the road when people go back and they can watch it and it's timeless. I think When We Were Kings is one of the greatest documentaries. It's timeless. And you watch it and you go, that footage. And that footage is out there. It's all out there. YouTube is great, but I think we can gather it. The Darryl Sittler 10 points, 50 years later, and all the numerological things that happened to Sitt during that time. Team Canada 72 still resonates, and where they are now and all of the things that happened, when the wall came down in sports, figure skating, why, what happened really during that scandal? I think there's so many good stories. I'm going to along onto one, and I hope, again, it's not about winning an Oscar. I just think it'd be nice to tell those stories.
Lastly, what are you what are you up to for people that have seen Rod Black? Maybe the last time they saw Rod Black was on TSN, or maybe doing a CEBL game. What's Rod Black doing?
Well, I'm doing a CEBL game on launch day. So the CEBL season, which is on CBC this year, which is good for them. Yeah. I love doing those games. I love doing games. I did the Allen Cup recently. Whatever. Have Mike will travel. I'm doing stuff in the States as well. Some NCAA stuff. Lots of speaking engagements and a lot of charity events. Writing a book. But again, and then, a lot of production stuff. I really enjoy that. So I really try to keep busy. I say in the book, I never retired. I just, I know the book's called Cut to Black. And, usually Cut to Black is, which we're going to do soon here. Cut to Black is usually an ending. To me, it's like an intermission. It's a recharge, because you're going to fade up. And it's, I kind of like the term in the book because, I don't think anybody does in life. Once you stop moving, then you're going to start losing. So I like to keep moving, and I like telling stories, and I like doing these things, and I like talking sports.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today, and I hope you have a great launch with the book, and it's successful. Thanks, and we'll be looking out for you.
Yeah, I'll be watching CBC Sports Presents, and I'll be watching you.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Thank you, man.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Neil.